everybody, it is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we got Steven of the almighty Chelsea Grin. Great to be able to talk with you, man. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Stoked to chat.
Yeah, stoked to have you here. Thank you for not only giving us some new Chelsea Grin to end 2022 off on a great note with, but to also start 2023 off on a great note with. We got the double album of Suffer in Hell, Suffer in Heaven. Was this like a preconceived vision to make a double album as a follow up to Eternal Nightmare, or did you guys just have so much material written it just kind of turned out that way?
Yeah, when I was writing it, definitely wasn't in my head that it was going to be two albums. But I like, I'd always rather go to the studio over prepared than under. So I went with like 30 ideas, of different stages of readiness. And then we got there and we were like, damn, we could do two albums if we want. I mean, why not? So so it was more like got to the studio, realized we had a ton of material and figured we'd do a double. Also, it had been a long time since our last record, so we wanted to make sure we came back with, more than just one album. So yeah.
Yeah. Could the first three singles that we heard so far off of Suffer in Hell be a good representation of what the entirety of not just this album but the whole series will be like? Or is there a lot more to be discovered and that's just scratching the surface?
I think it's really just scratching the surface. It was really hard to pick singles for this whole process because, you know, each of the three singles we've released kind of has their own vibe to it. But there's a lot more different vibes on the record as well. It's pretty diverse across the board, and that, stands for both records. So I think people can expect to hear quite a wide array beyond what they've already heard.
Yeah.
It was definitely tough to pick songs that represented the whole album, and it would have been impossible. So
Yeah, definitely. And like even though Chelsea Grin is, and not to pigeonhole, is categorized in the realm of deathcore, I think when you compare Desolation of Eden up to now, there has been such an evolution with different members coming and going and whatnot. When you first came into Chelsea Grin and you were working on Self Inflicted was your first contribution with the group, right?
yeah, that was the first record that I started writing with the band on.
Okay. Were you kind of like looking at albums such as Ashes to Ashes, My Damnation, and Desolation of Eden, being like, okay, this is how I have to play? Or were you kind of like given a little bit of free range to, bring in a little bit of your own mix into Chelsea Grin and further experiment?
The guys were really easygoing about, like when I started writing, they didn't give me any particular direction. I mean, obviously, I wanted it to fit in with the rest of Chelsea Grin, the rest of their discography. So it was an easy process. I mean, I'm not exactly shy to say that Self Inflicted is not like our proudest album. It's not my proudest work, but it was a good chance for me to just at least start revving the engine and like preparing to write for the band. So yeah, it was easy. The guys were awesome about it. It was like a very seamless and anxiety free process, and it just kind of came naturally. I was working for the band. I was their guitar tech for a few years before that, so I had listened to them a ton. Was standing on stage just watching them play these songs, so I kind of really became familiar with the style just through experience.
Yeah, to quote James Hetfield before when he burned half his body and he couldn't play guitar, if you're a roadie or in the crew, learn the band's songs, you could end up on stage with them. So,
Yeah, exactly. It rings so true. I've got a few friends that went through a similar arc.
yeah. And I'd imagine too, working in like the technical element, knowing how the sound works and, knowing gauge and all that gear, that has to help as well on a technical level as for Chelsea Grin, right?
Yeah, I mean, I still set up like if we're doing a tour and we decide not to bring like a guitar tech or a stage dude, we'll I mean, I still set up the rack. I know how everything works. If something goes wrong on stage, it's like I've got one hand playing the guitar and I've got my other hand like plugging shit in. It's crazy. I'm glad for that knowledge.
Yeah, definitely. It really helps. Like, you don't have to know everything about, your instrument, and you don't have to know like every single form or scale or whatever, but to have the ability to technically converse with other musicians about music is always an advantage. And I hear that too, like when I hear the technical elements in like Eternal Nightmare and even Suffer in Hell and Suffer in Heaven. I mean, do you have a theoretical background as well? Because some of the work does sound like relatively studied in a way.
So I'm pretty limited with my theory knowledge. I mean, I started off playing guitar and taking lessons pretty seriously, and for about the first 5 or 6 years that I played guitar, I was, heavily, studying theory and working with teachers to like, master the instrument in every way. But then eventually, I think when I went to college, I was just like, okay, I don't have time to study theory and school. So that's sort of when it dropped off. And at this point now, I'm kind of like a caveman with music theory, but it's just like an ear thing. I can hear what sounds right, what sounds good. And I do wish I knew more. I feel like it would open up my like writing repertoire. It would kind of just add to my toolkit. But I've gotten this far with crumbs of knowledge. So it's really just about having the ear, I think,
Definitely.
for me.
Definitely. And when I listen to the music as well, like when you look at Eternal Nightmare, for example, going off from, the wolf to Across the Earth to Limbs and even the title track, Eternal Nightmare, there is a lot of emotion that I feel that it's demonstrated in the riffs and the breakdowns and your overall style. Is what we're hearing instrumentally representative of an emotion that you were feeling at that particular time? Or is it kind of like a source of external inspiration that you're channeling into your instrument?
I would say it's a little combination of both, honestly. I mean, when I'm writing, and this goes for Eternal Nightmare and for the new albums, like I'm traveling a lot when I write. I like to like go to different places, stay with different friends, go travel to different studios and just like, rent out spaces and just sort of use that external inspiration, a new place, a new city, just a new group of people to like motivate me in that way. But then at the same time, anytime I'm writing, it is sort of a reflection of what I'm feeling at the time. So, I can listen to even songs on the new record. I mean, I had a lot of this stuff written 4 years ago. So I'll listen to stuff on the new record and it's like a little portal back to what, where I was and what I was feeling. So yeah, it's a combination of internal and external influence.
Well, when we hear these songs on the new album, being that you written these songs a while ago, is what we're hearing how these songs were originally structured in a way, or did they kind of like change a lot over a span of time?
It's different for different songs. Like we work with a producer because we really value that like external input. So a producer helps with songwriting and structure, and like adding production elements to music. So for the most part, I would say that most songs, when we got to the studio, we kind of put our heads together to be like, okay, well, we've got 2 minutes of a song here, which, is say 5 different parts. Now we just take these 5 different parts and arrange them in different way to get a 3 minute, 30-second song. So I think it's like I approach the studio with the material written, but then it's just a matter of mapping some of it out. And it's just kind of nice to get a third party um, opinion on these things. It just kind of eases up some of the pressure, and producers are just wicked good at structuring songs. I mean, depending on who you go to. So
Definitely.
that was a big thing for us. It's not like a laziness. It's just like it's kind of nice to have someone else validate and encourage the songs to reach their full form. So every song comes in at a different level of readiness.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, with every producer, whether it would be Bob Rock or Rick Rubin or, Kato, may he rest in peace, like every producer like has their own vision that's incorporated in it. And anybody wants to say that using a producer is like cheating, oh, you should only know how to do this yourself. It's like, I would say that 99% of the most amazing and most historical albums had input from the outside as well.
Oh, 100%. I mean, any artist above a certain level is working with the producer to some extent. And I think there are artists who let the producer write all the music. There's different degrees to which people utilize a producer. For us, it's more about structure and like production elements that some of us may not hear. Like I do a lot of production myself, but I come from a certain school of production. I'm more of like the symphonic and like epic production guy, whereas the dude we worked with, Zach Jones, is very into like electronic sounds, and he's just really experimental, and he's just got this crazy brain for hearing how he can take a sound and morph it into something wacky. So it's like I get that some people think it's sort of a cop out, and like I don't necessarily feel it. I wouldn't want to be in a band or working with a musical artist where someone else was writing all the music and like I was just performing it. But no, it's not cheating. It's not like we're sitting here being like, hey, dude, can you write us 16 songs? It's like, hey, dude, here's 30 tracks. Help us pick the ones with the most potential. And then you can be a part of the process of finishing them.
Definitely.
We're still involved with everything. At no point do we let someone else just steer the ship. So it's still extremely hands on.
Definitely. Now, I don't know if this is maybe a question more for you or if this would be more for Tom, but I am kind of curious, being that you had all these songs written before you thought about, the titles and the concept of Suffer in Heaven, Suffer in Hell. Do you feel that, like, now that it is a double album, that this brings another layer of meaning and, like, another layer of context to it? Or do you kind of, like, feel the same way about the songs when you first wrote them as opposed to now?
I think that it's less to do with, well, I don't know. It's an interesting question. So the idea behind, the title Suffer in Hell, Suffer in Heaven is that nobody is above or goes without some degree of suffering throughout life. And, wherever you are, whoever you are, there's going to be some degree of that. Now, that was sort of like titled as such after we had finished writing everything and we were reflecting on the process of it. We were reflecting on like the state of the world and everything that was going on. It was like, I don't know. I think it was lessons, but it was like inspired by the process, it wasn't like we named the album or we had this concept in mind and then started writing. It was, we reached the end of our time in the studio. We were like, well, what do we call this? And we reflected on Tom's lyrics and about what a lot of them were touching on. We reflected on sort of what, like I said, the world was going through, what I was thinking about when I was writing. And it was just like, well, this album's really just about suffering, and not necessarily in the darkest light. It's like there's a lot of encouragement going on in the album too, a lot of like empowering lyricism. But yeah, I would say the whole suffering concept came in, post writing when we were looking back at everything.
Yeah. And suffering is, obviously, it's the most unfortunate but real duality where, like, when we are at our worst, art is at its best. Is this about personal suffering that maybe you and the band were going through? Is this a very personal subject matter? Or is it almost kind of like demonstrating the different types of suffering through whether it will be loss or despair or failure or something like that? Is it almost kind of like a suffering documentary, if you will?
I would say there's some songs on the album that are a little bit more reflective on what's happening outward, but a lot of the songs are, for Tom, like personal, very, very much about experiences he's having or about experiences we're sharing as a band. And then some of it is, reflective outward, what we're seeing happen, or just about the concept of pain overall. And then I guess I shouldn't say concept because it gives the idea of a concept album, but like it's every song in one way or another is about internal or external pain people are going through. Well, there is a song that's just about like orcs marching on like a castle and like killing everybody. But
Got to
you
take a
know,
break
I
from
guess
the.
that's about suffering. There's physical suffering there. But yeah, I don't know if I veered away from the question there.
No, you
But
definitely answered it in a way, because like that stupid saying, "There's nothing certain in life except death and taxes." Well,
yeah.
I first off, I think that some maybe going to jail is better than being homeless, so maybe taxes isn't that certain in some degree. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but suffering is one of the most certain things. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, your background, whatever. Every human being suffers in the world, and I think it's one of the greatest subject matters for art in a way. And um, do you want this album to almost kind of resonate with fans in a way, like to almost be something that a fan can relate to, or do you think that this album could also maybe inform a fan on a certain topic?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, like I said, there are songs that are about very personal experiences, but they're not experiences that like no one else could have possibly had. It's about, I think, relatable experiences. So I think fans will be able to attach to songs and say, "Hey, I know what they're going through. I know what they're talking about with this one, or I know what feeling they're trying to get because I felt this too." But I also do think that some of it, is Tom trying to be like, "Well, hey, look at this. Like, pay attention to this, or think about how this is affecting the world." Things like that. So it is trying to be informative, but also reflective. I keep saying reflective, but like, yeah, it's supposed to be like a teaching and also an expressing album. So I think people will find that they can connect with a lot of it for the most part.
Do you, if we were to, like, let's say, listen to just instrumental versions of this album, I guess maybe this was already answered since you told me that these songs were already written before the concept of a double album, but is there gonna be maybe kind of like a distinction between Suffer in Hell and Suffer in Heaven in a way? Would a fan be able to like listen to an instrumental version of the track and be like, okay, this song is off of that album and this song is off of that album?
Not really. I think that we wanted to kind of divide them to be as equal as possible. Like we didn't have like a heavy side or a lighter side. We didn't have like a positive and a negative side, or like a stylistic shift between hell and heaven. Um, I think maybe they wound up in hindsight. The more I've listened to it, I feel like Suffer in Heaven has a little bit more groove on it, and I feel like Suffer in Hell is a little bit more metal. But that's like, it's barely so, and it wasn't an intentional decision. I think instrumentally, it's I don't think people will be able to be like, oh, okay, this song is clearly a heaven song or whatever. And I think there has been that a lot of people have been asking that question because, heaven and hell, people think it's going to be like, here's a dark side and a pretty side. I was like, I just tell people it's like, no, it's just all metal as hell, and like I said, the album is so diverse stylistically that like there would have been no sensible way to actually divide it into two if we were going down to like the sound, the genre, or like the influences on every song. It's just so
Yeah, yeah.
all over the place.
Yeah, the pretty thing in Chelsea Grin. I don't think I think the most pretty Chelsea Grin has ever sounded was maybe on a track like Don't Ask, Don't Tell. But like I think if that's the prettiest Chelsea Grin song, that's saying a lot.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing on these albums that I would consider to be like Don't Ask, Don't Tell style pretty.
Okay.
There's no like singing on the album. Well, I guess there's a couple singing spots, but it's not. It's like more layered back. It's
Yeah.
it's tucked. It's underneath a scream, or it's like crazy reverbed out. So it's kind of more like textural. But there's nothing pretty about it. I think there's parts that are pretty, but it's not like at no point was I sitting down and I was like, I'm gonna write a pretty song. It was like, oh, this song turned out,
Maybe.
you know, pretty
Right,
ish.
right. Do a cover of Sweet Child of Mine, just for the trolls one day.
Yeah, right. I should, huh?
And I have a few more questions for you. But when it comes to the songwriting in general for a band, is it really better if all of the members really are in the same headspace and on the same page when songwriting? Or being that, you're all individuals, could maybe having different emotions and feelings different ways could actually help enhance the songwriting in a way?
Um, I think it's kind of important. Well, I don't know. I think both could have their benefit. If a whole band is going through something really tough together and they're suffering through something together, that's going to create inspiration that could create something awesome. And if everybody's sort of bringing their own feelings to the table, then I think it's just a matter of knowing how to organize that. If you're going to channel that into writing music, then just be mindful of it. If I'm feeling crazy joyful one day and David comes in and he's having a miserable day, it's not like, I got to think about how I'm going to translate that into a song. Um, so I don't know. I'd say both could turn out to be, an awesome environment for writing, or way to approach writing.
Definitely. And for you to get that inspiration, that creative energy, if you will, do you almost kind of like need to look for it? Do you have to kind of like put yourself in a specific place in order to cultivate ideas? Or does inspiration just strike when you least expect it?
Oh man, this is a tough one. Well, not tough question to answer, but inspiration is a tough concept because I could feel nothing for a month, and this is just me. I know some people who can write music all day long, every day, but I'll go through periods of time where I don't write a riff for a month because I'm just not feeling it. Part of that has to do with like my environment. If I'm feeling kind of stagnant and stale at home, or like I go to my studio and the studio is just not the right vibe for the day, then it's not going to be productive. But some days I wake up, open my eyes, and I'm like, yeah, it's go time today. But this is also part of why I like to travel a lot when I'm writing, is because I do feel like I am very influenced by my surroundings, or more so, my mood is influenced by my surroundings. And if I'm in the right mood, then I will write. It's less like, oh, look, there's a beautiful, beach. I'm going to write about that. It's more like the mood that the beach puts me into is conducive to writing. But inspiration is it's a tough one. It can be kind of discouraging. And there's like times when I go through life being like, well, I haven't written anything good for X amount of time. Like, have I just lost my spark? Is the last thing I wrote, is that the last thing I'll ever create? And then one day it goes away. It's just like clockwork, it always comes back. But for me, it's hard to force inspiration into place.
Definitely.
Even listening to other music, like, it's there's no exact science to like getting myself in the mood or like getting myself inspired.
Yeah, I've always thought that maybe, like, is it easier to maybe be in the company of your bandmates, or isolation being the fuel for creativity? What it is, I thought maybe you kind of like prefer one over the other.
I do like to write alone, um, just because like I'm a slow writer. I'm super methodical, and like I like really flesh stuff out while I'm writing. Like my pre-pro is super decked out. It sounds a certain way. It's got all these layers. Everything's really dialed. All the guitars are like edited. Everything's very much thought out so that I can do less work later. And I feel like when people are sitting in the room writing with me, it's like a little tedious for them. Um, but at the same time, sometimes I'm sitting alone and I'm like, well, damn, like the loneliness or just being alone, it's easy to like kind of get distracted. So it's nice sometimes to have the guys there to like kickstart some inspiration. I don't know. I guess I'm sort of 50-50. I don't need to be alone. I don't need to be with people. I think if I go a long enough time being alone, then I'm like, okay, I could use some people in the studio. And then if I have people in the studio for a really long time, eventually I'm like, okay, I could stand to just be alone. Um, I tend to write alone the most, but that's just circumstantial and less to do with like not wanting people there.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And the final question I wanted to ask you is actually about your live the live show for Chelsea Grin, because I've seen Chelsea Grin numerous times on multiple diverse lineups with different members coming and going as well. But like one thing that I've always found fascinating about Chelsea Grin is the live presence. It is intense. It is in your face, whether you're sitting in the seats at Gramercy Theater watching that trash can get thrown from one side of the room to the other, which I was there yesterday. They wanted me to pass that message on to you. Um, like watching that, or whether you are in the pit. So I've seen Chelsea Grin with multiple lineups in the band on different tour lineups from different angles, all over the place. I kind of really got a. Is there like a similar energy that you channel into your live presence as you do in your songwriting? Because I'd imagine when you're in the studio, it is a more confined, more static environment. You can't exactly crowd kill there with all that expensive gear. So
Right.
like, is there a similar energy that you put into your live presences when you're songwriting, or when we're listening to the album, and then seeing you live? Those are two completely separate sides of Chelsea Grin.
I think there's probably more of a separation there than there is like a channeling of emotion into the live set. It would be kind of a roller coaster if I was like investing my emotions into the live set to like mirror what the songs are going through, if that makes any sense. I think that's more on Tom. For me, I mean, to be honest, when I'm on stage, I'm just stressing about playing it right. You know what I mean? I think that my head is on a one-way road of just like, don't fuck up, just play well, be good. Like, here comes an intense part. My mind is, I have very short-sighted when it comes to playing on stage. But I think that it's more Tom's you know realm to like convey and instill the emotion of every song. But I do think that live, our intention is just to bring it as hard as we can, be as solid as we can, and just deliver the best performance we can. Whereas on recording, our intention is to inject emotion into our music and create 6 songs. So I do think it's pretty separate. I think obviously hearing the songs, just hearing the songs for the audience is hopefully making them feel what we had hoped they would feel, whether it's live or listening to it on a CD. But yeah, I think they're pretty separate, at least in our heads. Whether the audience has that experience, the same or not, I'm not sure, but I hope they do.
Yeah, definitely. You have a very dedicated fan base. Whether every show I see, whether you're there or not, I'm seeing Chelsea Grin shirts left and right, and people resonate with your music on the CD and on the live. I just think for them, seeing you guys live is very cathartic. With like everybody in the crowd is moving just as much as you guys. So
Yeah, yeah, I do love. I mean, playing metal is awesome because the live shows, like, you get that movement. That's the thing, is like that's where we get our energy from. Is if the crowd is going crazy, then we feed off of that. I mean, you've heard everybody say it 100 times. It's like an energy exchange, and I love our fans. It's awesome. They go really hard, but they also like to watch and like study and like focus. So it's cool. We have like quite a diverse crowd these days, I feel like.
yeah, you definitely have a lot of fans examining your pedal board, guitar nerds, as much as they're examining like the crowd.
Exactly. There's just as many people sitting there watching me play guitar and like waiting for me to fuck up as there are moshing. You know what I mean? So,
Well,
but also, we've been around a long time. Our fan base is getting older with us. So like, I'm 31. I'm not going to be in the mosh pit. I'm going to be watching the dude play guitar. So
yeah, either you fuck up or someone's getting fucked up. So that's
exactly. That's the Chelsea Grin show.
so. Before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time and for such an awesome chat. Is there just with the release of Suffer in Heaven and Suffer in Hell? I know they're coming out at separate times, but what could we be expecting from Chelsea Grin in the future, if you're allowed to say, of course?
Yeah, I mean, with a new album cycle means lots of touring. So we're going to be everywhere. I was just saying yesterday, if you live on Earth, then you will probably have a chance to catch a Chelsea Grin show in the next year and a half. So we'll be everywhere. We'll be touring a ton. I'll be playing with a lot of friends, and just so much new music to like really fill that set list with. So this is a good time to come and catch the band.
Hell yeah, it most certainly is. Thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Chelsea Grin, Suffer in Hell and Suffer in Heaven. Be sure to be on the lookout for that. We will see you next time on Heavy New York.